The Starladder Berlin Major 2019 happened this past weekend in Germany. You can put it in the books. 3 straight for Astralis after defeating not Team Liquid in the finals. That was the quarterfinals. We'll get to that. Jacob Wolf here to break all the CSGO action down from this weekend. And that was really the story, right? The quarterfinal matchup between Astralis and Team Liquid. 2 teams taking very different paths. Team Liquid, #1 in the world. They were the favorites going into this tournament. Astralis definitely wasn't, but they definitely dominated in this one. Why are we seeing such converging roads for these 2 teams?
You know, I feel like Astralis has a significant advantage just because they've done this before, right? This is 4 majors total, 3 in a row, as you mentioned. And so there's a little bit of mental fortitude that comes down with the major. It is a long grind to win a Counter-Strike major versus winning another tournament, right? And so Team Liquid has earned that first place title by winning a bunch of the other tournaments that happen mostly in one weekend. But the major it's a long period of time. You have gaps, and you have to learn how to practice, and you have to learn how to stay mentally focused in a 3-day slugfest, right, or a 4-day slugfest of the final playoff weekend. And so I think Astralis knows how to do this, and so therefore throughout the weekend, I think they know how to keep themselves composed and win matches.
Yeah.
Team Liquid hasn't figured that out yet, right? They are depending on how much stock you want to put in a major. I was about to say they are the best team in the world, but obviously, there's a lot of arguments, right? And also, like, the HLTV rankings are not necessarily definitive in some people's opinions, so you got to look at it, right? But Team Liquid's one of the best teams in the world. We can say that. But they haven't won a major, right? The only North American team to ever do it is Cloud9, and that was it was a huge upset to run through what they did then. Team Liquid's got to learn that, right? They got to learn this grind. And I think that if they stay together and they work towards it right, rather than doing what a lot of Counter-Strike teams and split up and make changes and make drastic changes despite coming in top 8 place and qualifying for the next major and legend status. If you look at this, I think Team Liquid will eventually get there. I thought this was going to be the time they did it, honestly speaking. But I think Astralis has a little bit more mental fortitude, and that gave them the edge.
Yeah, the dominant Danes. Astralis made it all the way to the finals. They defeated a surprise team en route to claiming the championship. Avangar, a team from Kazakhstan, did very well in this tournament. So did a team like Renegades. So we had a couple of underdog stories. What made their run so impressive here?
That side of the bracket was really interesting, right? So it was Renegades, ENCE, Avangar, and Vitality. Vitality has been a team that since they picked up the secondary French roster and built here, they have been super good. Vitality has been ascendant. They're someone that you should have watched out for throughout the last couple of months heading into this event. And Avangar beat them. And then right next to them on the bracket, Renegades beat ENCE. And ENCE has also been another ascendant roster, right? They've performed very well across the past 6 to 8 months. And so that side of the bracket was fascinating. Those 2 teams, Avangar and Renegades, faced each other, and then obviously moved on. Avangar played Astralis. When you looked at
we should note that final was not close, though. I mean, Astralis really handed it to them.
No, not at all. But, looking at that, like, Avangar is not the Commonwealth of Independent States team you would think would win that, right? Like, Navi has traditionally been the CIS giant, right? And they lost out on the other side of the bracket to Energy before facing, and Energy faced Astralis. But when you look at that, Avangar was not predicted to be like this. They beat a very good French team in Vitality, who are now making pretty drastic changes, as I alluded to earlier.
Yes.
And so props to Avangar and props to Renegades. I don't know how likely they'll repeat this in the spring of 2020, wherever that major ends up, but nonetheless, like I think that there was a really interesting tournament. It was exciting, nonetheless.
Strong weekend overall, like you said, a good tournament, but the numbers reflected that as well. The Berlin Major led the way in viewership across Twitch this weekend. The numbers they averaged about 243,000 concurrent viewers.
The crazy part about that, it was less than almost every Counter-Strike major of the last 2 years.
So right, but it's still impressive for this weekend.
Yeah. Even though it was like the leading thing in a world where LEC finals were taking place and LCS Gauntlet, and there were a bunch of DreamHack Montreal, there were a bunch of different events, right?
Overwatch League.
Yeah, Overwatch League. When you look at everything it was competing against, for it to still lead the way, yet underperform generally for Counter-Strike, that says a lot. It's a game that you cannot ignore because it's the second biggest, in my opinion, second biggest game in the world.
So when you look at those numbers then, and also it peaked at 341,000, 4.7 million hours watched, but like you said, not necessarily compared to previous Counter-Strike events. Is that concerning, or is this just an off weekend? An off weekend is not even the right way to label it. It's more like just as compared to previous Counter-Strike events.
So here's my critique, right? And this is, I thought the tournament ran generally fine. I thought the venue was really cool. Starladder is not a company, when I saw that they won this major bid, they were not someone that I go, wow, they're going to be able to market it to the audience that someone else can, right? So if you look at the majors that have been consistently very high on the viewership and engagement charts, it's been E-League and ESL and these companies that know how to market, right? I have seen more promotional material for ESL in New York, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that is it's a big event, right? But it's a regional event generally, and it doesn't have the status of a major. I've seen more promotional material on Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms of advertising that for ESL in New York than I did the Starladder Berlin Major. And I think that's just by nature of ESL as a giant conglomerate that knows how to do this and has done this for a long time, and so is Starladder. But Starladder is a much smaller company than ESL, or Turner in the case of E-League, and that's why I think when you look at this, even though it was impressive for Counter-Strike to lead the way, it's not as big as the previous Counter-Strike majors. So I'm not concerned for the game's health cycle. I think that whoever wins the Spring 2020 major bid and the Fall 2020 major bid or Summer Major 2020 bid, whoever wins those, Valve needs to evaluate part of that as the equation.